We created a new White House tool to report social media bias, censorship, and discrimination. We saw you folks being taken off, and we fought on all of you.
Censorship on social media? Trump and his allies have been pushing this idea that the mainstream social media networks are biased against conservatives. And yeah, a few people have been kicked off or deplatformed.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
For starters, there's Alex Jones. Facebook booted the conspiracy theorists off earlier this year, calling him a dangerous individual.
Do you understand that? Serious crap.
Great, so he's off. But you can still find plenty of people further to the right than Trump tweeting and posting with ease. Like this guy, prominent white nationalist Richard Spencer. He was a speaker at the far-right Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia 2 years ago. He's a guy who says and thinks things like,
"To be white is to be a striver, a crusader, an explorer, and a conqueror."
What about former KKK Grand Wizard David Duke?
Yep, there he is, prolific tweeter. So where do you go if you're like Alex Jones and you get kicked off of Twitter or Facebook? Or if you're a neo-Nazi that just has to have a swastika in their social media profile picture? Turns out there's a site just for you. There's tons of people on it. Gab is all about free speech, so
Gab is what it says on the label. Come for the Nazis, stay for the Nazis. It's a nasty platform. My name's Ethan Zuckerman. I direct the Center for Civic Media at the MIT Media Lab. I study social media, and in particular, its effect on activists, its effect on civics, and on democracy.
Zuckerman's been looking at the big social platforms which are struggling with how to tamp down on the disinformation campaigns and hate speech that are threatening democratic elections, polarizing society, and making it harder for people to tell truth from fiction. On that front, Gab doesn't even seem to be trying. It's actually welcoming the conspiracists and the haters, the people too extreme for mainstream social networks. Gab's not the only far-right social media network. There are others.
20 minutes before the El Paso killing spree, the accused shooter announced his grim intentions on social media.
A message board called 8chan made news recently after a man posted an anti-immigrant manifesto before shooting dozens and killing 22 people in El Paso, Texas. Not the first time a mass shooter took to a far-right platform before going on a killing spree. Gab got a lot of attention after a man attacked a synagogue in Pittsburgh last year, killing 11 people. He was a frequent Gab user, and before the attack, he went on the site and posted, "I'm going in." Far-right social media networks still want to appeal to a broader audience, and they see an opening now that Trump and his campaign are talking about mainstream social media platforms being biased against conservatives.
We had a terrible bias, troubling bias.
The argument that they make is that they're being silenced on other platforms. And there's elements of truth to that argument. What's now happening is there is this far-right sphere which is trying to create a parallel ecosystem of platforms that people have been removed from.
Gab is much smaller than Facebook, which claims 2.4 billion monthly users. Twitter has 321 million. Gab, meanwhile, claims to have more than 1 million user accounts.
I think it's fair to say that what's going on Gab is some of the most extreme speech you're likely to encounter from that white ethno-nationalist point of view.
Let's see what Ethan Zuckerman's talking about. Let's try logging into Gab. So here's Michael Winner, about 1,500 followers, some 56,000 Gabs. Those are like tweets on Gab. A lot of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories on his feed. Vile stuff for sure. But what about actual Nazis? Oh, there we go. This post says racism is normal, natural, and healthy. Here's a post critiquing other white nationalists, saying they failed to protect a guy named James Field. He's the guy who rammed a counter-protest to the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, killing a woman. According to this Nazi Gab user, the tragedy is, I guess, that James Fields is going to prison. After Bowers attacked the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh, Gab's web host, GoDaddy, dropped the site. So did PayPal. Gab lost a lot of the services necessary to run a modern website. But it's still here. It continues to find a way of maintaining and even expanding its digital foothold. Gab's even built a novel web browser.
There's something pretty frustrating about the idea that the far right and the neo-Nazis are the folks who are experimenting with possible futures for social media. So I'm reluctant to dismiss Gab because the people who are behind it clearly have some resources and clearly have some creativity that they're willing to use. It's just that they're using it for horrible, horrible purposes.
Twitter's terms of service mean ethno-nationalists or white supremacists can find themselves running afoul of one policy or another. Here's a policy against hateful conduct. On the other hand, Gab's policy against posting quote-unquote unlawful content makes it clear that posts that are, quote, merely offensive or the expression of an offensive or controversial idea or opinion aren't illegal. Gab makes the argument that hate and even live-stream violence happen on Facebook and other big social media platforms. In other words, the problems are not unique to Gab. I reached out to Gab but never got a response.
In some ways, I worry less about explicit hate sites like Gab.ai or Stormfront than I do about sites where hate is tightly integrated into the rest of the experience. I'm less worried about a world in which you have to make a choice to go visit the neo-Nazi bar than one where you're having dinner at TGI Fridays and suddenly you discover that it's the neo-Nazi night.
So far, you still have to consider Gab a fringe site. But as with the white supremacists Gab caters to, the Trump era could create opportunities for the website to clean up its reputation.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.